with you our experience on what cyber threat intelligence is. I'll skip this, we already have that. Just a reminder for the cartoons, for the security awareness. Actually, by the way, I just realized that I was going through our Facebook page. We actually have about 1,500 followers from Ecuador. So maybe there are some in the room. Okay, now, where does cyber threat intelligence fits in? Traditionally, the approach to security is pretty much the same. It's a wheel of waste. We find the problem, we try to fix it, we reach a feeling of sort of assurance, and then back we go again into finding new problems and so on. In the end, we spend a lot of money. Okay, the traditional approach is the blue boxes. Basically, we have the protection, so we have the firewall, the antivirus, so we can do some assessment. Then we have detection to detect attacks or intrusions, and then we have the reaction, so investigations, computer forensics. This approach is not that good because it's like we are waiting to be attacked and we are waiting for things to happen. A better approach is to try to predict the future, as in trying to anticipate what could happen to us and who could be attacking us. And that's where cyber threat intelligence comes in. If you think about how we get compromised as an organization, there is something from the military tradition called the kill chain. Now, the kill chain in the military is basically the series of steps that have to be taken in order to achieve an objective. Okay? So an objective could be to, I don't know, to gain possession of a town or to break some enemy lines in a certain area. Okay? So we have an objective. Now, in the case of ICT and cybersecurity, the objective can be stealing information, it can be taking down a system. Now, you understand that for an attacker to achieve this goal, it's not going to take 2 seconds. It has to go through a series of steps. Now, the kill chain identifies these steps. Traditionally, you have the reconnaissance. We learn about the target. We then weaponize. We develop weapons, the tools that we are going to use to attack. Then we deliver these weapons. So it could be a rat, for example, that we discussed this morning. That's our weapon. And then we deliver this weapon through some phishing campaign, for example. Then we exploit. So we actually make sure that the rat is executed, is installed. Okay? So we exploit, install, and then we start communication with a command and control. Of course, we are installing something, it has to communicate back until we actually achieve our mission. There is an action there. Now, if you think about the traditional security, most of the actions, the defenses, and are in this area here. We basically identify some intrusions. Maybe we don't know that, we don't realize that we have had an installation. We don't notice a compromise. And even the actual exfiltration of information, we may not even notice. Statistics tell us that most organizations find out about a breach from a third party. Okay, so most of the security these days is here. Now, cyber threat intelligence actually moves the focus here. It helps organizations understand what's happening here before it hits the organization. So that's cyber threat intelligence in a nutshell. Now, as a definition, I know my friend Mikhail from Kaspersky also used this definition. So paraphrasing this definition, cyber threat intelligence is the process of learning about threat attackers, learning about their capabilities, objectives, their motives, and try to use that information to inform our decisions and what we can do to prevent risks, to minimize the risk. So if you look at the big picture, you have obviously the threat actors or threat agents. They have certain goals, which could be, for example, to capture information. They may have a strategy to achieve those goals, and they will use what we call tactics, techniques, procedures, which are identified as TTPs. If you look at cyber threat intelligence reports, they always talk about TTPs. And then you have the indicators, okay? So the tactics, techniques, and procedures define what the attacker will do to implement the strategies. And the indicators, in a nutshell, are just the footsteps, the footprints, sorry, that are left behind. So I carry out an attack, I leave some traces behind. Those are the indicators at very high levels, okay? Now, looking at the sample threat actors, I told you this morning I showed you a table with some threat actors. This is a more elaborated one. We look at a number of them. Again, it may be too little to read from the distance. You'll get a chance when you get the slides. But you go from cyber criminal, organized crime, activists, down to opportunists. And they all are potential threat actors for your organization. They all have certain motivation. They all have certain potential targets and goals. So learning about who is the most likely threat actor to hit my organization will help me understand how to protect. So I'll give you an example. If you are an oil company, okay, which one is most likely to hit you as a threat actor? Is it the cyber criminal, the organized crime, is the opportunist? Now, let's say is the cyber criminal, okay, or maybe state-sponsored criminal, okay? If you know that the potential actor that is targeting your organization is a state-sponsored criminal, then you know that this particular type of criminal or threat actor has unlimited resources, unlimited capabilities, and therefore the type of defense that you have to put in place are completely different from, say, an opportunist, okay? When we talk about indicators, I said these are the footprints that are left behind. You will also hear sometimes talking about observable. Now, there is a difference between an observable and indicator. An observable is any piece of information related to the operations of computers and networks. So an IP address is an observable. An email address is an observable. A hash is an observable. Anything that you can observe is an observable. When does it become an indicator? It becomes an indicator when it is associated to an attack or it's associated to an intrusion. So an IP address may be an observable until is recognized to be part of an attack, in which case is defined as an indicator. I always try to give definitions because my background is also academic. I've been teaching and running a master program in security for many years, and I find that if we get the fundamentals wrong in the definitions, we can't communicate, and we can't really understand a topic, a domain. Samples indicators, you have them there. So you have domain IP, domain names, IP addresses, URL, user agent. There are so many. Now, if you're talking to different vendors, they will be able to provide you with different type of indicators. Not every vendor will support all these indicators. Okay, so that's important. Another way of looking at indicators is using this scale. You have indicators of compromise. This is evidence that proves that there has been a breach. Okay? Then you have indicators of an attack. There is no breach, but there is an attempt at breaching your organization. And then the worst one, the ones that are most difficult to identify. These are the indicator of deception. Indicator of deception can be, for example, an IP address that appears to come from China. However, yes, it's coming from China, but it's probably bouncing through 3 or 4 proxies and Tor exit nodes and so on. So it is an indicator that is trying to show that the attack is coming from one place when it's actually coming from somewhere else. Now, what intelligence do we need? And I tried to collect a number of examples of threat intelligence to give you an idea. These are dashboards for many products, okay? You probably recognize some of them if you have them, so you have different vendors, but these are SIEM technologies, log management systems. These give you an understanding of what's happening in the organization. But what is cyber threat intelligence really, and what does it do? So we said it's about learning about the attackers, their capabilities, their motivation. But the way I also like to explain cyber threat intelligence is that it's a process that allows us to yes, okay, we have sorted. Thank you.
Hola.
CTI, cyber threat intelligence, cyber threat intelligence, I've got it, thank you. Cyber threat intelligence is a process that helps us minimize our risk exposure. Okay, so risk is given by a threat actor who has capabilities to exploit some vulnerabilities and have an impact. Okay, usually organizations focus on minimizing the vulnerabilities, fixing the vulnerabilities. They don't look at the threat actor and the capability. Cyber threat intelligence is about risk, but it focuses on the threat actor and their capability. Okay, now there are 3 main types of use cases for cyber threat intelligence. You have monitoring, and if you remember the kill chain, it's about monitoring in this area here. You know, the reconnaissance, the weaponization. Basically, I want to know, is anybody building capabilities or tools to attack my organization? Are they planning an attack? Are they talking about me? What are they saying? Understanding what are the threat actors in my industry. What are they doing? What are their capabilities? What are the attacks that are being carried out? You know, if I'm a bank and I know that there are campaigns, attacks that are being carried out in other banks, in other parts of the world, I want to know. Maybe it's going to come to my area soon, in my country soon. Okay, so cyber threat intelligence is about monitoring, but it's about monitoring here. It's not, you know, internal monitoring. Of course, there is also internal intelligence. Okay, so that's one. Then you have threat assessments and investigation. I'll tell you more about each one of them. Okay, so monitoring. This is very important, for example, for organizations that have mobile banking. Okay, where I work in sort of, you know, a lot of Africa, but you know, now in also they are becoming very, very popular in Europe. Banks are introducing and use every day mobile applications to allow customers to access their bank through their phones. Okay. Now, if I told you if I asked you where do you download mobile apps, you probably say from these 3 stores. Okay. However, I can also show you this slide. The number of mobile applications, the app stores that are available in the world is higher than 100. You have over 100 mobile application stores. You have mobile application stores from telcos, from vendors, from manufacturers, country-specific, China, India, and they sell millions of applications. Now, if you are a bank and you have a mobile application and you have a rogue application that is designed to fool you and is being installed and is being served from one of these websites, you want to know. okay? So that's one thing that you need to have. That's one domain of cyber threat intelligence, the ability to monitor mobile application and rogue stores and rogue mobile applications. Another example, technology watch, okay? This is very, very important. How many vendors do you use in your organization? How many operating system vendors, how many applications, how many databases, how many network appliances do you have? So a typical organization will have hundreds of applications between operating system, application, database, network, okay? Now, this morning I told you that one of the most common way of getting compromised is through unpatching and misconfiguration. Now, if I have hundreds of applications, how do I keep up with the vulnerabilities and the patches for all these applications? You know, the usual process is I subscribe to the vendor mailing list. They notify me and say, hey, you need to patch. Microsoft tells me I have to patch. Cisco tells me I have to patch. But if I have 300 applications, I'm going to go insane. Okay, so one use of cyber threat intelligence is to monitor all the sort of vulnerabilities and patches for all these applications and get them in one feed, in one single stream of data. Okay, so instead of having to subscribe to 300 mailing lists, you actually get them in one place. That's one example. These are just the screenshots of TDPs and indicators. This is information you get from vendors. You know, every vendor will give you one, okay? Some better than the others, but that's just information. Now, CTI threat assessment. I apologize. I think I loaded the wrong presentation. 1 second. Because the one I had a lot of examples. Yes, apologize, just one tiny second. Okay, so I'll just give you some example. This is from a similar presentation. Now, I said 3 use cases: monitoring, threat assessment, and investigation. So monitoring, one thing is the mobile applications. Network threats, okay? So if I am a telco, I am a CERT, or I am any organization that is interested in understanding the level of infection, malwares that is running on the country, I can do that through cyber threat intelligence. This is just an example from one vendor, and behind the red dots you have countries, okay? And I can easily see for each country the number of compromised IP addresses, the type of compromisation, the type of malware that is running, and a lot more information. So I can easily monitor the threat level in, let's say, in a country, but I can use the same thing also to do a threat assessment of a third parties. You know, a lot of the compromises for companies come from third parties. You're a large bank, you have suppliers. Supplier comes in, does support. You welcome them through your door, but you actually welcome an organization that is being compromised. You know, the target organization in the US was compromised because of a third party. You can monitor the threats associated to third parties. Phishing. One use of cyber threat intelligence, as I said, was to look at this side of the kill chain, okay, before the attack hits the organization. However, one very good use is, remember I said, cyber threat intelligence is about risk, minimizing risk, by looking at the capability of the actors, their motivation, and so on. And many organizations are notified about attacks by third parties. Classic example is phishing. There are many phishing websites that are put up every single day, especially if you're a bank. Would you not want to know if your bank has a phishing site or if your organization has a phishing site before your customer tell you, or before someone else tell you. Okay, so cyber threat intelligence, one of the application is also to look at available phishing sites. Are you familiar with the Ashley Madison scandal, the dating website last year? I think it was this year, right? What happened there? The dating website was compromised. Okay, we'll not go into the details as to why, but what happened was that the hacker that compromised Ashley Madison posted the credentials of the Ashley Madison database online, and it exposed the email addresses and credentials of a lot of people. And a lot of people on that web dating site were using corporate email addresses. So there were very big companies with a lot of email addresses. And you know that people tend to use the same password across sites. So if I see a company X from Ashley Madison with password Y, I can try to use the same password on the corporate network. And actually, it may work. Now, cyber threat intelligence will allow you to monitor also for the publication of this data, lost data, and notify you in cases like that, so you can take actions and minimize the risk. In this case, the risk is minimized by minimizing the impact. The compromise is already there, but you can take action so that you can respond. You know, you don't wait for the newspaper to come to you and say, do you know that your company has lost 20,000 email addresses and they all belong to your company? You have a response. You have an action plan. If you're a bank, okay, cyber threat intelligence is about also telling me if there are credit cards that belong to my bank that have been stolen and are being sold on the black market. I would like to know that. It's compromised data. In this case, it's a compromised credit card. Compromised accounts, we already talked about that. Lost credentials, okay? I want to know if any credentials belonging to my organization have been lost or have been compromised, okay? Again, it's about the impact of that. Social media, that's already told you about, technology watch, TV indicators, executive threat assessment. I can use cyber threat intelligence products and services and the process to understand what type of threat a senior executive for an organization is exposed to. You know, there are a lot of spear phishing attacks targeting senior officials in your organization. I want to know the exposure. I want to know if the senior management, the board members of my bank or of my oil company are completely exposed. Maybe they misuse Facebook. They put a lot of data on Facebook. They put their personal email address, the company email address, the phone number, where they live, where they go on holiday. I want to know the risk exposure because attackers can use this information to carry out attacks. And you know, there are many examples to recall, but there are examples where companies have lost millions of dollars because an email came from the CEO to the finance manager authorizing $500,000 payment to a supplier. And because the email came from the CEO, it wasn't questioned, and the company lost $500,000. Okay, how do you think this is happening? Because, and I bring you back to the kill chain, the attacker does reconnaissance. They try to learn about the target. They try to learn about the CEO, the senior managers. But I can also do that. I can learn about that, and I can understand what is the risk exposure. The same thing I can do for third parties. If you're doing business with an organization, or you are choosing a supplier, or you are monitoring a supplier, you want to know if there are threats associated to that supplier, especially if that supplier gives you support and has access to your systems. They actually have access, administrator access to your system because they have to support it. But I want to know if this guy has been compromised, if the organization has been compromised, and what is the threat level. And I can do that, and I can monitor that. Assessment, deep web, dark web, you all know that, okay? So, the bottom line of finding information in the deep web and dark web, one is the one that is not indexed, and the other one is that one is not completely, cannot be searched, okay? Is that for cyber criminals to monetize, to make money out of information, you know, they may talk in the dark web, they may have forums, they may exchange information, but in order for that information to be monetized, it has to bubble up somehow. And therefore, you need to monitor that. And when you're talking about cyber threat intelligence, there are some vendors which have very strong ties and connection with the underground community. They have the capability to monitor forum, cybercrime forums, communications in different languages, in different countries. And so now going back to the presentation I was doing, that's the example that I missed that I wanted to give you. And I think we are nearly there. 1 second. Yeah, that's the one. So just a couple of minutes and we're done. So now, when we are talking about cyber threat intelligence, we are talking about different types of capabilities, depending on what you need, okay? The most common form of cyber threat intelligence is IP reputation, domain names, email addresses. That's fantastic. That's very important because that falls into what we call, falls into the category of what we call machine-readable threat intelligence. It's intelligence that you can feed to a machine and you can automatically allow response. So if I get a feed from a vendor that tells me about IP reputations, I can use this feed to generate a blacklist, to configure the firewall, the intrusion detection. That's nice. But basically, when you look at cyber threat intelligence in general, these are the 4 key characteristics that I always find very important. First of all, it has to be timely. If you're telling me about credit cards that have been stolen or lost data, I want to know now, not once it's been used. I want to know as soon as possible. It has to be accurate, okay? I don't want false positives. If you're telling me about a compromised data or lost credentials, that's fine. But I don't want you to tell me about something that happened 2 years ago just because you found it and it's been fixed, okay? It has to be accurate. It has to be relevant and tailored. Relevant basically means it has to be useful for your business. If you're telling me about a ransomware campaign that is hitting hospitals and is exploiting a specific, let's say, TeamViewer vulnerability, but you're not a hospital, you're not using TeamViewer, maybe that's not really relevant for you. You may be aware, but it's not something that you can use. And then tailored. If I'm talking to an organization, I know Mikhail also talked about that, you literally have 3 types. You have strategic, tactical, and operational type of intelligence, okay? So senior management, security managers, and staff. These people need to have the usable intelligence that we can use to configure the devices. Then the operational intelligence is about understanding the campaigns, it's about understanding the technical capabilities of the attackers so that we can prioritize the tactics, the execution of the security. And then the senior managers, they need strategic information. They need to have information to help them make investments, understanding the direction of the company, understanding what is wrong about what they're doing, and if they need to change direction, okay? If there are competitors that are after them. You know, if you are an oil company, or if you are, I don't know, a production company, you may be interested in knowing about your competitors and what your competitor is doing that could be a threat to you. That's a strategic type of intelligence. It's nothing to do with IPs and domain names and URLs and stuff like that, okay? So there are different types. And now to my final point. Now, cyber threat intelligence is fantastic. I love it. There is a lot of value that you can get out of it. But you see, as a consultant, I always try to give value. And I wouldn't be giving value to you if I said, you need to get cyber threat intelligence now. The first thing that you need to do, and that any organization needs to do, is to cover the basics. You need to have some certain level of maturity. I use this quadrant to basically describe the level of security for many organizations. You have two axes. You have the technology, and then you have people, okay? Technology identifies what you use. You can go from open source to very expensive technology. And then people, you can have one person in your security department up to, you know, a full chart of people with roles of responsibilities and so on, okay? So it's various. Now, most organizations, when they start, they are here. They either have poor people, as in they have a number of people, but they're not trained, they're not competent, there is no structure, and they're not using technology. And then they need to migrate to some real security, where they have good structure, good technology use, and so on. But what is the most common approach that I always find? They go, instead of going like this, they go like this. Because what they do, that instead of investing in capacity building, in people, in structure, in processes, they just acquire technology. But technology without people just gives you a false security because you don't know how to use that. So really, you should aim for real security by investing in people and getting sure that you can use the technology. And final remarks, is cyber threat intelligence needed? Of course it is. How much and what type of cyber threat intelligence depends on your organization. Depending on your maturity, where you are in that chart, you may be in a position to enjoy things like lost data, lost credentials, threat assessment to executives, third parties. That's fine. But that's for you to decide, depending on where you are. But there is a whole range of services and products in the cyber threat intelligence domain. I've done a study in the last few months, and one of the things that actually came clear from this study is that the cyber threat intelligence domain at the moment is far from being mature. And when you speak to vendors in general, you will also come across that their business model is yet to mature. You know, some don't even have precise pricing for their services. It depends. But if you talk about a firewall, I know the price. But if I'm talking about cyber threat intelligence, it's difficult to find the price. So it's still quite a long way to go. But you need to do your homework. There are a lot of cyber threat intelligence services, products, and what I was trying to do today is to give you an overview of what cyber threat intelligence can do for your organization. So beyond just IP reputation, domain names, which is very, very important. But there is a lot more out there that you can benefit from. And that's the end.